Goshen Theater Drama Club members, fans, friends, and family, welcome to Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks, episode 22. Ba, 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 ba.
Did you practice that choreo?
I did not. That was cold. I pick up dances very quickly.
Very good, very good.
I don't actually at all. Don't quote me. Welcome to today's episode. We have obviously our regular panelists here today, and we have several special guests live from Japan. We have Akira Watanabe. Akira, how are you today?
Good.
Wonderful. How's kindergarten?
It's been good. We got 2 new kids. They are like 1.5-year old, so they're good.
Oh my goodness. You're teaching them English and they can't speak Japanese yet.
No. So no conversation.
No.
Just chasing around. That's it.
That's a lot of fun though. And also Randa Meierhenry live from Colorado. That's how you say it, right?
Yeah.
That's it. How are you, Randa?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, Randa is new to Table Talks. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am originally from Lincoln, Nebraska, and I worked with Amber and Katie and Akira and Paul at the Round Barn Theater in Indiana. I guess that was 2 years ago now, wasn't it? Yeah. I am currently on tour with Fiddler on the Roof. Yeah. And hopefully we'll be coming back and doing that soon.
Yeah, I think that tour was scheduled to come through South Bend in 2021 at some point. So
yes, so hopefully they'll reschedule that stop again. But yeah,
we'll come harass you.
Yeah.
Yay! And also our regular panelists are here. Paul, you're getting folded into regular panelists. I'm sorry. Sorry about it.
Does that mean that I don't have to be asked back at the end of every episode now?
I mean, you probably still will be. On a trial basis today for this episode, you can be a regular panelist.
Great.
How are you, Paul?
Doing fantastic.
Oh, delightful. And live from somewhere, I never quite know where, it's Miss Katie. Katie, how are you today?
Wow, I'm good. I'm in Michigan from here on out. My friends are at least until Chicago reopens and my job is ready for me again.
Awesome. That's awesome. So today, if you haven't joined us before, normally we have either your questions or some hot takes. We actually have some really good audience questions in the can, but we're going to do another hot take today and save some of your questions for next week. And today's episode is dedicated to songs that you don't want to sing, shows that you don't want to do, songs you would never sing in an audition, things you get asked to do that you don't want to do. It's all about the stuff we don't like, that we don't want to do, that we refuse on moral or whatever grounds, any grounds we want, we don't want to do it. That's what we're talking about today. I call it Voldemort songs. So episode 22, the songs that shall not be named. Today's hot take, which I really like, is what is the worst piece of miscasting that you have ever seen? Now, we're going to try to keep this to kind of famous-ish people. We're not going to talk, Paul, directly about people we know and how you think they were miscast.
Never.
Okay. So I'm going to start with, Paul, I'm going to start with you since we were just talking. What's the worst piece of miscasting that you have ever seen?
Well, I hate to do this to go first, but I'm actually going to sort of put a twist on it. I think in the late 90s, there was a revival of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, starring Nathan Lane, which was incredible. And after Nathan Lane left, they wanted a big name to take over, and they got really creative with it, and they went in a totally different direction. And I don't know how many of y'all remember this, but Whoopi Goldberg took over as Pseudolus in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which is absolutely not a role that in a vacuum that you'd ever imagine her in. But in this production, they changed some things, they made it work. And that's actually, when I saw the show, I saw Whoopi Goldberg, not Nathan Lane. And she really brought a totally new perspective to the character. And I really, that was the first time that I had ever seen the show all the way through. I was pretty young in the late 90s. And so, yeah, so I think while there definitely are examples of going against type and going against the norm and what's expected in casting that can go horribly, many people talk about the 2003 or 4 or something revival of Fiddler on the Roof with Alfred Molina and a mostly non-Jewish cast, but I think sometimes it brings out a whole new way to look at the piece. So that's my lukewarm take.
Yeah, I was once in an all-white cast of Showboat. It did not bring any new dimensions.
Oh yeah, no.
It was an all-white cast of Showboat in a lab theater. And it was academic theater too, so it does have a different purpose than, theater, but still, yeah, no.
I mean, if we're gonna go down that road, at theater camp, I saw an all-white 20 or so person production of Ain't Misbehavin'.
Oh, no. That's terrible. Oh, that's great. Randa, how about you?
Well, I think that a lot of people, the most public, I should say, miscasting often happens in movie musicals. And so I don't know that I necessarily disagree with some of the casting that was done in the Les Mis movie, but there are definitely some actors that Russell Crowe that get made fun of kind of justly. And you can hate on me for that, but I don't know who I would cast instead of him, but I don't think I would cast him.
That's why it's hot takes. Like, that's a hot take. But like Russell Crowe also, like the thing that frustrates me about movie musicals is that they cast people who can't sing to play these roles when there are people who are gifted actors who can sing. And the justification is that they're not film actors. Like,
Exactly.
stage actors are endlessly adaptable. So give it a try. Very annoying. Katie, what about you? What's your hot take?
I think I kind of go off of Randa in the fact that I just left it as a blanket statement that anytime a production just pulls star power in on Broadway just to have a name on the marquee for a draw, it drives me insane. There are perfectly good stage actors and actresses who work their tail off to get those roles, who are so used to being on the stage, and you bring in these actors who some of them might have started on stage and some of them do very well in the roles they get. However, there are plenty of times where they don't belong on the stage. They chose movies for a reason. So I would agree with Randa. I'm not into the whole let's just get a star name on the marquee just so that our investors give us more money and we can sell some tickets. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. More often than not, I would say it probably doesn't.
If the revival of Chicago that is currently on Broadway does not come back after the pandemic, then the last Roxy Hart in that over 2-decade-long production will have been a real housewife.
Do you know what's funny is that Melanie Griffith as Roxy Hart is my answer to this question, because I saw one promo video with Melanie Griffith as Roxy Hart and there were no notes sung. So it's all in the same theme, like taking Hollywood actors who are big names and injecting them into things that they shouldn't be doing just to sell tickets, either movie tickets or like stage tickets. Akira, what do you think?
Honestly, I don't think I have seen or in a show much. I can tell that was miscasting or anything.
Yeah.
But I think I get tricked. So if the casting wasn't maybe not good, or like maybe it was mistake, but I feel like, oh, okay, that's another choice, cool, that's another perspective, cool, that could be, and I think I get tricked. So
It's
I don't
the willing suspension of disbelief. You're not being tricked. It's that you're like, oh, I like this story and I like where this is going, so I'm on board. That's good. You're today's Molly, since Molly's not here for this episode.
I will put two pieces of like the other side of the coin of that onto it, which is that oftentimes when stars are brought in to sell tickets, it is because the show is getting a little desperate, and to continue employing actors. So even though it does kind of take a job away from an actor, it sometimes will keep a show afloat through the, January, February darker
Yeah.
season. Like Mandy Patinkin almost going into Great Comet to keep it alive. You know what I mean? That whole debacle.
Well, I think that's smart though too. I think, yeah, as long as we can like keep theater going and keep it alive, using the engine of celebrity isn't a terrible idea, I suppose. But Linda Blair in Grease as Rizzo is probably
But everything in moderation, yes.
probably a bridge too far. Oh, and that has been Hot Takes. Woo! So many controversies. It's so spicy in here. My goodness. Oh. So today's episode is about songs and shows that shall not be named. This is all about like shows or songs or things that we would not do, don't want to do. But Paul made an excellent point at the beginning before we started taping that most of us would probably do as part of a professional contract because we're all professionals. I think I'm going to start today. I never start, but my Voldemort show is Grease. I can't stand Grease. And I know like what I hear from people is that it's really fun to do, but I feel like it's so overdone. And it caters to so many negative stereotypes that I'm tired of it. And it's almost ubiquitous. Like it's constant. The movie also came out the year that I was born. So there has never been a moment in my life where that movie didn't exist. I was so close and it never happened. But yeah, there's something about it. I'm so sick of it. And I will even admit that the stage play is worse than the movie. I know, because it's that episodic thing that they tried to do. They tried to do it as a series of vignettes, and that's fine. But when you see it done as a through plot, like when you see the film first and you assume that's the plot, and then you see vignettes and Moonin', whatever Moonin' is, it's a fine song. But what? Why are we mopping? And what's going on? And who is that?
It's duty.
Yeah, it is duty, Paul. You're right. That is a good way to say it.
We're going to have to exchange some words next time we see each other about the stage version versus the film.
Oh, maybe that's next week's episode. But yeah, that is mine that I just don't like. And would I take a contract for Grease if they offered it to me? Sure. I would even direct Grease if it was offered to me. I would try to inject some amberness into it. We'll see like how that would go, but I just don't like it. I've never sought it out, and I don't like, if it pops up, I get rid of it. It's just not my thing. Ugh. Thoughts? Cool. Randa, what's your Voldemort show song, etc.?
It's Rent, which maybe a lot of people, I know I've only really met people who love Rent, love it so much, or like really don't like it. And I'm one of those who just really doesn't like it. I just never really like vibed with me. Also, it's based on La Boheme, an opera. And spoiler alert, okay, so at the end of La Boheme, Mimi is dead. And that is far more dramatic and, for me, satisfying ending than her coming back to life. I don't know. Just like, yeah. Would I do it? 100%. I would have a great time being in that show. But I don't want to see it. And, I don't really want to do it. But
I was on a little jog a couple weeks ago, and the end of Rent came on, and that's a long song. I like it when a long song comes on when I'm jogging because it makes the time go faster. And as I was listening to it, I realized that like most of the things that they were saying, they were like, yeah, counterculture, was like Huevos Rancheros. It was like, wait, what? Like, none of these things. Oh yeah, we're so crazy. We eat huevos rancheros. Like, wow, how controversial.
It's also so funny to see how much, like, how contradictory to its own existence Rent has become, because it's become
Yes.
so mainstream and so the center, the popular culture instead of the counterculture that it was born out of. And the idea that, yes, like that's like Randa said, like one of my biggest criticisms is like the whole point of the show is no day but today, right? YOLO in musical form. But then she doesn't YOLO. She yalts. She lives twice. She dies and then she comes back. That's the point.
Y'all. You're a nerd. Yeah, I think the original workshop productions of Rent probably did have more to recommend them. And the fact that Idina Menzel got cast because she punched a taxi outside the audition room and Jonathan Larson saw it.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either. That's hilarious.
Yeah, she almost got hit. She like screamed epithets at them and punched the taxi right in the taxi face. And they were like, "Oh, she's arrived. There she is." Uh, but yeah, I think you're right. Like I was one of those Rent lovers because back in '96, it was the year I graduated high school. Obsessed, obviously, with musicals, and everything up to that point had been like Sondheim and Andrew Lloyd Webber for a while, and Rodgers and Hammerstein, Lerner and Loewe. So it was a very like classy foundation, and like everything is set in Paris, like Les Mis and Phantom and all these shows. I was like, oh yes, Paris. Yeah. The idea that something could be contemporary, a musical could be a contemporary story that was also not about like really privileged people, even though they kind of are privileged people grappling with their privilege now is like, oh, we're not going to pay rent because we don't have to, because we're entitled to stay here with a, like the whole premise now as an adult. I'm like, oh, this is dumb. But
Also wasn't ever like actually finished. Jonathan Larson died before he finished it,
yes,
right? So
yes,
it's an unfinished piece, and so people are so into this show with songs that would have been cut had he made it to the end of tech, I'm
right.
sure, or would have been.
They were in preview, right, or out of town preview?
I think it was like before or after, just after, right around the first preview off Broadway. He
Yeah.
never even saw it transfer to Broadway.
Yeah.
Which is a crying shame.
Oh,
it is. It is. But yeah, I think it's there's so many things to recommend Rent, and it is the legacy of someone who died so young, and it is sad, but again, it is such a snapshot of one specific thing, and looking at it through the lens of modernity. I'm getting my master's degree. Looking at it through that lens, it is a little. Would I direct it? Would I act in it? Would I play the violin in the pit? Yes, I would. And I would.
A violin in that pit?
There is not. So I'll just jump down there. I'm ready.
I also think that people really latch on to these, like Grease and Rent, both movies that are accessible to people who can't go see a Broadway show all the time.
Yes,
and
that's
so
true.
I think that's why a lot of people love it so much. Not that there's anything wrong with loving it so much, because if that's what you have, like, man, when I was a kid, I watched Chitty Chitty Bang Bang every single day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It just like, I don't know.
I think the other thing about Rent is the thing about representation. So I think a lot of people love it so much because there is representation of many different populations that were not well represented in musicals up to that point, and kind of still aren't. There's no kinda, and still aren't. But there's LGBTQ people who are presented just as human beings and not as stereotypes, which is great. We've got like people of color being well represented within that cast. And I think that those things are valuable. And yeah, you have even a transgender person in a musical in the 1990s. That's big. It's big. So it's it would be hard if I was part of a marginalized population and loved something, to see myself on stage and go finally, yes, oh my gosh, I love this because I see myself in this, it'd be hard not to fall in love head over heels with that thing, kind of regardless of whether or not Huevos Rancheros is really like cool or not, you know? Katie, what do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it really does. People who love it, who I know love it, are those minority groups who see their representation for the first time growing up. I myself, I wasn't really into Rent until later on in my life, but my best friend, who was a closeted LGBTQ plus member throughout high school, loved it. She loved it, and I didn't really understand the appeal. And then when she came out of the closet, and this conversation is like, that's probably why she loved it so much. She saw herself finally. So yeah, I would say that representation has a lot to do with that. But shall I tell you my little spiel?
Oh, sure. Feel
About
free.
my choice? Okay.
Sure.
So I would just say that, like, there's songs when auditioning that I would never sing, or when I was younger that I would never sing because of age appropriateness. But I think the only show that I have absolutely no interest in, and I've said it many times on Table Talks, you all could probably tell it to me yourselves, it's Cats. I don't care about Cats. Now, if someone said, hey, we want you to come be in Cats, I'd be like, well, all right, if you want to pay me, I'll do it. But I don't care about Cats. But with that said, I would say that what I'm trying to do from here on out, and what I've been trying to do the past couple of years, is make sure that I'm conscious about the contracts that I take, and the roles that I accept. Because coming straight out of college, I accepted a role that is typically played by a Black woman. And I didn't understand why that was bad. I had never been spoken to about that. I just looked at it as, I finally have a job. I have a job. And that's not the attitude I should have had. I mean, as a young actress, it's understandable why I would have that attitude, but also it's not okay. So a couple years ago, I was being spoken to about directing Hairspray Junior for a camp. And I knew the area that I was going to be in. I knew we wouldn't have the representation for the Black community and the children that we have at camps. And I put my foot down and I said, I'm not doing that. If we don't have the children to do this properly, we are not going to do this. I will not do this. You will have to find someone else. And they took it off the plate because I said no. And I think that's what we all have to start doing, taking responsibility for ourselves and actively paying attention to what we're doing. I would never want to play a role that is written for a Black American. I would never want to play a role that is written for a trans person. I would never want to play a role that is LGBTQ plus, period, because I am none of those things and I cannot represent the story correctly. It's not that I wouldn't want to tell the story for them, because I would, because I think it's an important story to tell, but I cannot do it justice. So for me, it's all about conscious casting and making sure that I'm not taking a role away from someone who actually should be playing that role anymore. I've done it. I hate that I've done it. I didn't understand it at the time. When I did, I felt awful. I still feel awful about it. But like, that was the situation I was in. It's not a good one. And I've learned from that, and I'm going to keep learning from that. So I think it's all about conscious casting and making sure that I'm playing roles that are appropriate for me.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, Miss Katie. I know that when we talk about this, it doesn't mean that you have to be every single thing that every single character that you ever play is. There are some shows where it's more important that you have like one aspect of yourself that you can connect to the character than another, particularly like things you can't help, cultural things, things that you're born with, like your sexuality or your gender ideation. Those things are things about you that you can bring to the table. And of course, we always talk about, what do you have as an actor? What do you have as a director or musician? All you really have as your toolkit is yourself. So bringing those things to the table is really important. And I think there are some, and maybe this is a hot take with me and Katie, I think there are some roles where the sexuality of the character is paramount to that story, so much so that it's completely woven into the character. I think there are some stories where maybe the sexual orientation of that character is less important than another aspect of that character. So it's a question of, do you think like there are like in falsettos, oh my goodness, there is the neighbors next door. The two women that play those are not like all the time played by lesbian women or bisexual women, because there are other things that they also need to be. So what do you think about like a situation like that, Katie, where maybe you don't identify with a particular part of that character? Like, do you think like, is that a story that someone who is straight should tell, or is it not?
Honestly, answer is I don't think you should be telling the story if you don't fit the role.
Right.
I think that if all avenues have been exhausted, they cannot find anyone that actually fits the role,
Yeah.
and you are the only person to do it, well, then you better be doing your research really, really well, and you better be talking to people.
Right.
You better make sure that you understand the role to your fullest capacity and that you do it the best justice you can. But overall, I don't think you should be playing the role. I understand casting is difficult in some small areas, but I think that you shouldn't pick shows that have those minority parts if you can't find good representation for it.
That's right.
Pick
and
a
I
different
think
show.
the rights organizations are getting more wise to that as well now, which I think is really smart. You talked about Hairspray. I think MTI now, they've changed the rules, the authors, that you can't do Hairspray about kids from other side of the tracks. Like, it has to be an appropriate production, which I think is a step in the right direction. I also do think that this door only swings one way.
I do.
Like,
yeah.
So if you have someone who happens to have like a person who happens to be LGBTQ plus, that doesn't mean they can't play straight characters. There is an inundation of straight characters written, or like non-minority characters written in shows. We're not saying that you have to be a particular, like you don't have to be white to play particular characters, but like this door does swing only one way. And I think that's appropriate. That's culturally appropriate. And I think that increasing the representation of people who are marginalized in our industry needs to happen. And if we have to do it using existing sources, then that's how that's going to be. But yeah, no, I think,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but with oh crap, Chicago, the original oh gosh, I can't even think of it's the jailhouse matron.
Oh, Mama Morton.
When originally done, it was a white actress, yes, is that correct?
Yes.
But in the movie version that people are most familiar with, we know that Queen Latifah, knocked it out of the park. Yes. She is
Mama Morton.
Yes, thank you. She is that role to me. Granted, that was my first experience with that show, was seeing it in movie form. But I think that the fact that they changed it to be a Black American woman was fine. But I don't think if it was originally written for a Black American woman and a white woman came around and took that role, I don't think it works. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's the intent that was behind it. But yeah, right. I do think it's a one-way door.
Well, yeah, I also think with that production specifically, the original Broadway production was a white woman, but I'm looking up right now. I think that the revival version was the first one to cast a Black woman as Matron Mama Morton.
I think you're right, Paul. There's also, I saw an African-American woman play Velma Kelly, and she is the best Velma Kelly that I have ever seen in my life. So it's not like these roles don't come with a specific bias as to race. I think that all of those roles are open to anybody of any ethnicity. But every Matron Mama Morton that I have seen since the revival has been an African-American woman. I've seen that show quite a few times, and they've all been African-American women, which I think works. It's great. The real Matron Morton was a white lady in real life.
Right.
Because it's not fiction. That show is not a fictional show.
It's I think it's also important to note while we're talking about this, and this is the thing that I keep going back to. I probably sound like a broken record, but also it's like you said, Katie, that when you first got that job, you weren't thinking in terms of propriety. You were thinking, someone wants to hire me to be in a show, which is very exciting. And I think that while there is absolutely responsibility on actors to make conscious choices in the roles that they accept, that is still their livelihood, and the people who really should be the first line of defense in appropriate casting needs to be the producers, the casting agents, etc., the casting directors. And that's something that I think we need to, not always put the responsibility on the people whose jobs depend on it.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this issue of like we are putting too many things on actors whose livelihoods in a completely competitive and fierce market are dependent on this stuff, and we're putting a lot on them to say, well, you shouldn't be in this show because they're not doing proper COVID protocols, or you shouldn't be in this show because they aren't casting properly, and you shouldn't accept this contract. We know you need to eat and we're not going to pay for that, but you shouldn't accept it ethically because of these issues. And I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's good as an actor to assess those things and to take a step back. But again, it is the livelihood of the actor. And that is a thing. And as a former casting director, I have to tell you, miscasting does not happen in a vacuum. It's not as if your casting director is sitting there by themselves and going, how can I screw this up? It happens as part of an ecosystem of casting that's often kind of a treadmill of the same cultural norms that have been recycled over and over again. And the market is inundated with actors, and white female actors in particular. So for some reason, that demographic represents something like 60 to 70% of the pool of actors in general. So it's hard as a casting director, particularly at a smaller theater company, but it is all part of this same ecosystem where we're trying to churn out stuff that reaffirms old stereotypes, that doesn't challenge the audience, that's about comfort. And everybody comes in and nobody's challenged even a little bit because nobody wants to buy a ticket to be challenged. We're not paying tuition. We want to be entertained. Blah, blah, blah. So there is a system that is sort of set up against it. And those things need to be dismantled from the top. And if your existing people don't want to dismantle those things, maybe it's time for some of us to step up into those leadership roles.
It's also pay attention to your audience, because
Yes.
I've worked in these small areas and it's hard to bring in people of color to those areas because there's racism in those areas. And
true.
I've had many castmates who have dealt with it. And it can be microaggressions, it can be blatant racism, whatever you want to call it, but it's there. And
Macroaggressions.
macroaggressions. You've got to step up for your people. If you want the representation to come and you want your shows to be represented well, you've got to make sure they have a safe place to come to. And if that means that you take a big stand with your patrons and they're no longer welcome at your establishment, that's what it needs to be.
And it's all kinds of diversity, Katie. We're not just talking about racial diversity or cultural
Correct.
diversity. We're talking about like height,
LGBTQ plus,
LGBTQ plus,
body
height,
images,
body type, ethnicity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's all there. And there's a lot of prejudice against a lot of stupid things. And I don't get it. I don't get it. I mean, we're all born with those extant prejudices and we have to dismantle them our whole lives. But yeah, the mentality of not wanting to dismantle prejudice is something that I don't understand. This got deep, you guys. This got really deep.
Sorry, it's always my fault, guys. I'm so sorry.
These are important conversations that need to be had. And we can, oh my God, we
Agree.
can talk about this for hours and hours and hours.
And we do.
And we should. We continue talking about it, always.
Yes.
Randa and I
Stop
were
talking
actually,
about it, that's when it disappears, and that's when we forget what is happening and what the world
Exactly.
looks like right now.
Absolutely.
Exactly. What were you saying, Paul?
oh no, just that literally Randa and I did have a conversation about exactly this just the other day.
Awesome.
Yeah, and yeah, just like Randa said, when those disappears, go back to our episode on racial racial
Yes.
issues in the theater, and specifically pay attention to the section on white comfort, and that.
Exactly. Akira, tell us. Bring us back to the topic, Akira. What is the song or show that you dislike or wouldn't want to do, etc.? The floor is yours.
It's from the West Side Story. I love the musical. I love it. I want to be in it, but I got called back for West Side Story, and they give me like lines even. I have to read the sites, and I'm like, I'm glad. Same as Katie, I'm like, yeah, thank you for giving me callback, but it's a West Side Story. I don't think any Asian roles was in there. So they gave me, I think one of the, I don't remember, from America, I think. The song from America, I think. That was like something, I think they make me sing the song or something. But I was like, I'm not gonna get casted. I know, but hey, thank you, I'm here. And I love the song. I want to be in the show. But as culture wise, I think the rhythm is too hard for me. I don't have that rhythm. Like, I want to sing. If you teach me, I'll learn as much as possible. I don't think I can do it correctly. So that was the show and song. I'm not gonna be in it.
That's such a wordy song too, and like you said, that those rhythms are so complex.
So hard.
The funny thing, Akira, is I think that you could dance the heck out of the dance section. I think you've got that rhythm down pat. You're like, oh, here's a high kick. Here's jump splits. Don't worry about it.
Let me lip sync. It'll be fine.
That's so funny. It's so funny how it's all like coming around to miscasting. Yeah, that's crazy to me. I understand too, like when you call somebody back, you have like, as a casting director, you normally go in with objectives of your own, and then you have the objectives of either your artistic staff or your executive producer. I understand the idea of going in and like, we're going to call back all the talented girls who can dance, who have dark hair. That's fine. But still, like, that's just, it's not, no. Unless you're doing something else with it, and then got to make a couple phone calls. No.
Kira, I thought you were going to say that you just hated West Side Story in general. So I was like ready for this fight because Paul loves West Side Story. And I obviously everyone knows that he loves West Side Story. He's been doing West Side Story. And I was just ready. I was about to go grab my popcorn and just watch this unfold.
I will tell you, there is absolutely room for Asian Americans in this West Side Story revival. So when Broadway comes back, we have a few Asian cast members. So when Broadway comes back, come on to New York and audition for the revival, for the replacement cast.
I will. Good to know. Thanks.
Well, yeah, you know, New York in the 1960s was just white people and Puerto Rican people.
Yeah.
That's all it was. 50-50 split down the middle. No. So that is appropriate. That's great, but that's very, very cool. Inside Baseball from Paul Regano, everybody. Paul, what is your like Voldemort show, song, etc.?
Well, when I read the question, the first thing I thought of was like, what was the thing that if someone puts this song down in front of me to play, I'll be like, you know, and like the first song that came to my mind, and I wouldn't, you know, like hold up cloves of garlic or anything, but I would sigh a heavy sigh and then go, okay, and then play Seasons of Love. Just because that piano intro is so iconic. Everyone knows what it is from the first chord. And it's not a particularly interesting song to play for a piano player. It's very repetitive, and it's fun for the singers, and I get it, and people love it, and it's got a beautiful message, and it's done to death. So for me, if I never play Seasons of Love ever again, I will die happy. That won't be the case, but the other similar thing, when I was a kid, I wanted to music direct Godspell. I think I might have told this story here before, that I got very excited when I found the score to Godspell and it had chord symbols in it and I could learn it. And I was like, someday I want to MD this show. And then I did 3 times in 2 months. And now again, I never need to touch it again. But the thing that's like scary to me is when someone puts down any song from the musical The Secret Garden, which is a beautiful show. And for whatever reason, I cannot get my fingers around Lucy Simon's patterns and the way she writes. The only song that I have gotten because it's done so much is Hold On, which might also be my favorite song from the show. So beautiful, so inspiring, such a beautiful, beautiful number. But I think if I were to like look at it and read it like a book, it would be a very interesting book. And I'd be like, wow, they really thought about this and put like, this is a really cool score. But when it's in front of me, it's almost always at an audition. And for whatever reason, my brain just has this mental block. And I think now it's, of course, like I'm getting in my head about it. Sounds like a bit of Earth. And I'm like, no. And then I start psyching myself out. But yeah, I don't dislike the Seer Garden. I think it's beautiful. There's apparently been a revival in the works for like several years now. I'm dying for it to come back. But I get very nervous when it's in front of me. A similar thing, which is not as bad as it used to be. When I was younger, it was all Stephen Sondheim stuff. Because his music is very, very difficult and very specific. Yeah. And it's also, it almost never looks like what it sounds like. And so I'm a very visual person, and that's a difficult hump for me to get over. But now I've been working in the theater for long enough, and his work is so ubiquitous that I've played it enough that I have a better handle on how to tackle Sondheim. And I can sit down and I can read it and make sense of it much more quickly. I also just like have a much more encyclopedic knowledge of his canon than I do of The Secret Garden. And no, that's not brag. That's just because I'm a nerd and I listen to it endlessly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's not a brag.
Mine are a little different. It's not so much about things I hate as it is things that scare me, because Voldemort's scary. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know plenty of accompanists who don't want to play Sondheim because you can't do the piano shortcuts of looking at it and saying, okay, C major, that sounds like this. So even if you play a wrong note, it's fine. You have to, like, with Sondheim, it's like, okay, so it's like an F minor with an added sixth and a 13th. Like, okay, so if I did this, like even just one section, if you were going to analyze it and make a chord out of it, it would be impossible for you to shorthand it. And even chord symbols in Sondheim songs, like if there's ever guitar charts, that's nonsense. It's
Really.
absolute nonsense. Someone just threw some letters at the page. Nobody was thinking about it. Like, it's wrong.
The same way that we don't read words when we read, when you look at a page and you read, you're not sounding out the word every time you see it. You've gotten used to shapes. Oh, this word is shaped like this. I recognize that shape. I know that word. It's the same thing with reading music. I know what a triad looks like in every key. I know the shape. I know the direction that things generally tend to go. And Sondheim just
Akira's impressed.
I am impressed. I don't play piano.
But you know what three notes stacked on top of each other would look like, And so you move that around to different keys, and that's just the theory knowledge. But you get used to things. Oh, this chord generally leads to this chord. Well, not with Steve.
No, it's great. You also, like, there's particular composers that, like, they go in a certain way, and like as singers, all of us I think know this, or as the way that we're all musicians, like, when you're singing a particular composer's song that maybe you're gonna get this style of music. Oh, it's Cole Porter, so we're gonna banty about in this little section, and the words are going to be close together. It's going to be quick rhythms. There's going to be some room for interpretation, and we're going to stay in these four notes. And then in the chorus, we're going to jump up to here. Like, you kind of know, right? You kind of know what you're going to get a little bit. Rodgers and Hammerstein are the same way. Like, in the style, you're probably going to have something hard and challenging to do, but you know when it's coming, and it's going to be on some beautiful lyric, and you know what's going to happen. With Sondheim, you have the idea that it's going to be hard to predict, and that's all you've got in your little Sondheim bucket. Like, well, I know this is going to be tough, so let's give it a try. Here we go. Oh my goodness, everybody has talked about their Voldemort stuff. Yes, I love it. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to hate in musicals. That's that's the summary. This is the overall thing. Like, there might be something that everybody in your cohort loves. Like, oh, everybody loves Heathers. You don't have to like it. It doesn't have to be your thing. It's good to know about it. And like, if there's a popular song or a good role for you, it's good to know about that stuff. If you're a director, it's nice to have a basic knowledge of those things. And there are plenty of resources, guys, that are out there for you so that you can gain a general knowledge of the tone or content or plot of a show. Wikipedia rocks my socks. Go check it out. You don't have to love something and get inundated with it in order to appreciate it, or at least have enough of a basic knowledge about it that you could, do an audition for it or get cast in it. Like, you will have an encyclopedic knowledge of it once you've done it. But Secret Garden is one of those shows for me where I didn't like it going in. I did the show and I liked it even less on the other side. So sometimes that will happen. The thing about this is that we all have different tastes, and you're allowed. We all have different influences, and you're allowed to have that. And it's good to ask these questions and say, do I like this? Do I want to do it? Is this something that I'm going to dedicate my time to? Because time is precious. Ask yourself those questions. And then we've also got, this extra layer of depth to this question about, is this the proper representation? Should I be doing this show? What are the intrinsic pieces of this character, and what do I bring to the table? Do I have the right tools to do this well? And in educational theater, that's, not as relevant as it is in professional or civic theater, because sometimes you don't have a choice in educational theater, but exercise your right to speak up, even in educational theater. Advocate for yourself and advocate for others, just like we talked about in last week's episode. So yeah, this is great. We're going to do final thoughts real quick. Katie, what's any final thoughts, any sum ups?
Cats will never be good. I'm sorry.
Dogs. Akira, any last thoughts?
It was great lesson about learning pianist.
I love that. Randa, anything, final thoughts?
I think that kind of going off what you said, you don't have to like what everyone else likes, and there's no reason to make fun of anyone for not liking something or liking something. What you consume and what you like as far as art goes is totally up to you.
Yeah. Truer words were never spoken. Like, yeah, you don't have to love everything. And art is deeply personal. So if it's deeply personal to you, then you're going to have preferences, and that's awesome. But don't put anybody else down for their preferences unless they like cats.
Real cats are fine. I have real cats. The musical's just terrible.
They've never done the musical at your house. Like, that would be the only way you would like it, I think, if you woke up and your cats were like, oh, Rum Tum Tug, there is a cat.
If I could get my cats to do cats, I would watch that.
There you go.
I'd watch that.
Arguably, they're doing cats all the time. Hey. Paul, final thoughts?
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to top all of the final thoughts we've had already. Remember that you are you. That is truer than true.
Wow.
Just that you hold the power you get to decide, like Randa was saying, you get to decide what you like and what you don't like, and what there's no real such thing as like good or bad. I mean, there is, but like that it is totally subjective, and that respecting other people's opinions is super important. And also there are places where it transcends opinion, like the things that Miss Katie was talking about, and you hold the power to say, I'm not going to do a Hairspray Junior if we don't have the representation.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great. We hope that you guys have enjoyed today's episode. If you have any questions or comments on today's episode, or if you have like any things that you deeply want to know that aren't about today's episode, any things that you want to know about theater, or any of the stuff that we have talked about, including self-advocacy, advocating for others, how you do that, what you like, what good first steps as an artist are, how to be a good advocate, we have resources for you. Reach out to us. You can either comment here on our YouTube channel, or you can comment on our Facebook post as well. We read all of those, watch all of those. If you write a message to Goshen Theater, if you write a message to Goshen Theater on Facebook, I will personally see that and give you a little shout out. Obviously, we'd love to hear your questions and hot takes for next week's episode as well. Please tune in next week. Always thank you to Goshen Noon Kiwanis for supporting Goshen Theater Drama Club. We would not be here without you. And coming soon, dates for our 2021 summer program and some exciting developments in the 2021 programming. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit next week in the first part of the show. So keep your eye out for that. Head over to goshentheater.org if you have any questions about any of that stuff, and we will see you soon. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great week, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.